Trump wanted the Nobel Peace Prize, but now it seems peace has become even more distant than before Trump returned to the Oval Office. At what stage are the negotiations now, and is the Kremlin winning? We are talking about all this today with our guest, Dr. Yuri Felshtinsky, a Russian-American historian. Dr. Felshtinsky, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
So the international press wrote that on Wednesday we could really get closer to a peace agreement, but nothing like that. Trump's envoy for Russia, Steve Witkoff, did not attend the Ukraine talks in London. Secretary of State Marco Rubio did not go either. In your opinion, why?
Well, because they have nothing to offer. You see, this all started before even Trump became president with the statement that he will stop the assistance to Ukraine as soon as he becomes president. And that's what he did. On 23rd of January, he announced that Ukraine will not receive any American help. What was expected after this, that Europe, of course, would become very nervous and would press Ukrainians together with Americans to capitulate, because the so-called peace initiative of Trump is not actually a peace initiative. It's the offer for Ukraine to surrender. And this is, again, a plan which was not produced by Trump. This was a plan which was produced in Kremlin. In June 24, Putin actually announced precisely the same plan, that Ukraine would surrender to Russia all territories which are occupied, and actually more, even some territories which are not even occupied at this point, that Zelensky is stepping down, that Ukraine is demobilizing the army, and that Ukraine is promising not to join NATO. These are the same demands which actually Trump announced to Zelensky, with the hope that without American assistance, Ukraine would choose to capitulate. Now, this did not happen. It did not happen in two steps, let's put it this way. First, Ukraine refused to capitulate, and this became absolutely clear when Zelensky went to the White House and had that famous conversation with Trump and Vance. And when Europe actually, after the speech which Vance gave at international, European Security Munich conference, whatever the title was, when he actually never mentioned Russian aggression, when he never mentioned NATO, and when he basically offered Europe to allow, ultra-national parties, let's call them this way, let's won't call them fascist, to allow them to participate in elections and to win elections. So at that point, Europe knew that there is no NATO anymore, and that Americans basically are siding with Russia. Now, again, at this point, Europe would have two choices: either to stay behind Ukraine or to try to force Ukraine to capitulate and to end this war through capitulation. It's clear that Europe chose to stay behind Ukraine. So now Americans actually have no position at all, honestly. So everybody is pretending that there is still a hope for so-called Trump peace initiative. Once again, this is not Trump's peace initiative. This is Putin's peace initiative. And so everybody is pretending that it's still alive, because it's not actually very useful for all sides, for Europeans, for Ukrainians, and for Americans to say that it's all over. But it's all over. It's all over because Putin does not need peace. Putin needs Ukrainian surrender. And those positions are so distant. I mean, Ukrainian position and Putin/Trump positions are so far away that there is no room for negotiations. Because again, Zelensky wants Ukraine to exist as an independent state, and Putin wants Ukraine to be part of the Russian Federation. And there is nothing what we could do, literally. There is no room at all. And that's why it doesn't make sense for Rubio to go to London or for Witkov to go to London. Witkov actually takes absolutely pro-Trump, again, pro-Trump dash pro-Putin position. All new demands which are made are actually formulated in Russia. It's not by chance that Witkov went to Moscow, talked to Putin, for like 4 hours, then went to Kiev and demanded that Ukraine surrenders Gazprom to Americans for to sell gas to Russia and Ukraine, something like this. I mean, all of those ideas are so ridiculous. But Trump needs to hold the negotiations to continue them, because he doesn't want to say openly that, look, we failed. I promised you peace in Ukraine in 24 hours. It's now the fourth month of my presidency, and there is no peace, and there will be no peace, and there will be no peace. It's obvious.
So Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff was expected to travel to Moscow this week to continue negotiations with the Russian president. The White House said, are these trips to Moscow at all useful for the U.S. or only for the Kremlin?
Well, again, when we say for U.S., it's slightly wrong, accent or stress, because we should say Trump. We actually should not say U.S. Honestly, Trump is doing many things which are so damaging for U.S. that it would take U.S. many years after Trump is gone to return to normality. Because when the United States of America plans to literally to take control of Canada and make it the 51st state of the United States. And please don't forget that Canada is actually a country which is equal in size to the United States, right? Or when the United States is talking about, occupying Greenland, which is actually part of Dutch state at this point, and part of NATO as well. I mean, it's so ridiculous and it's so damaging that we will deal with it for many years, right? Unfortunately, Trump is. There is a certain dependency of Trump from Putin. We could speculate why this dependency exists, but it's clear that it exists. So basically, Trump is demanding from Ukraine what Putin wants him to demand from Ukraine. Trump is demanding from Europe what Putin wants him to demand from Europe in relation to Ukraine. And Ukraine is a very important topic for Putin, and for this reason for Trump, because without taking Ukraine first, Putin cannot proceed into Europe. And his initial goal, is not to take control of Ukraine. This was the way they planned it. This was a very short, easy blitzkrieg. I mean, they were hoping to take Ukraine in like 3 weeks or 3 months and move further, first to Moldova, then to the Baltic states, then to Eastern Europe. Because remember, when Putin invaded Ukraine, the demand, and this was more than 3 years ago, the demand was that Russia would try to return the influence which the Soviet Union had over Eastern Europe. So this was not about Ukraine. It is now about Ukraine, seems to be. But again, for Putin, this is just a step. And for this reason, he cannot move further unless he takes Ukraine. For Trump, it's important that Putin would take Ukraine, because if Putin would not be able to take Ukraine, he would not be able to proceed into Europe. And then, if there is no war in Europe, America would not become great again. You see, Trump knows very well that the only reason America happened to be obviously great during the 20th century is because there were wars in Europe. And that's what he is trying to achieve with the help of Putin. So they're helping each other. Putin is trying to use Trump to force Ukraine to capitulate and to allow him to proceed to Europe, to take some states of Europe or the old Eastern Europe. And for Trump, Putin is important because he is going to ruin Europe for him. And Europe is the major enemy because Trump is at the same time in his internal politics, he's trying to ruin democracy. And this is democracy in the United States, of course, but this is also democracy in Northern America. And that's why we see this pressure against Canada. But the main enemy is Europe. So Trump is definitely trying to use him as an icebreaker who would break Europe, and this would assist Trump in building Great America.
According to the Trump's plan, in which the U.S. Also proposes recognizing Crimea as Russian, Moscow would end hostilities in Ukraine after such concessions. Is such a development realistic?
Well, here's the problem. We had and have some cases when the state is divided into two halves, and they exist for some time nearby, right, bordering each other, being independent states. The known example now is North and South Korea, of course, but the example which we had for many years in Europe was Western and Eastern Germany. But there is a difference. The difference is that Western Germany at the same time was part of NATO. So if for the sake of conversation or discussion, let's say Putin would say, I would like to have Crimea, I would like to have Donbass, I would like to have those territories which we announce have to belong to us, but the rest of Ukraine is allowed to join NATO. Then I would believe that the plan is to leave Ukraine alone. But since the real demand from Ukraine is that Ukraine is demobilizing the army, and at the same time promises not to join NATO, then we know that the real plan is to invade Ukraine again and to take the second part of Ukraine as soon as the opportunity presents itself. That's what wrong with the Russian offer to surrender territories to Russia. Well, besides the fact that this is not usually done by civilized states, and that this was never happening after 1945 in Europe, but but the main problem is that this is not a peace offer. This is again the offer to take a break, to allow Russia to consolidate, forces, and to invade Ukraine again. Because what Putin is demanding, that Ukraine would have no army and would not join any political, any political alliances like NATO, right? So that's what's wrong. So you could not, you can surrender territories, but this will not save Ukrainian independence under Putin's plan. Not at all. Not at all.
How do you think Putin feels about these negotiations? Does the Russian dictator win or lose the diplomatic component now?
Well, I think at this point he lost, and I will tell you why, and I will tell you what I think he lost. He was trying to take Ukraine in 1914, in 2014, through a kind of Anschluss, that he would take Ukraine, he would conduct referendums in different parts of Ukraine, and would present to the world the results as if Ukrainians would like to join Russian Federation or to be united with the Russian Federation. So this was a plan of 2014, and it didn't work. So they took Crimea, they started the war in Donbass, but they could not proceed with invasion of Ukraine. And the reason why they could not proceed with the invasion of Ukraine, because of course this was a mistake to start the war in Ukraine or against Ukraine, advancing from the east. And it's true he took Crimea very quickly, but that's because he had Russian troops in Crimea according to the old Russian-Ukrainian agreement. But he couldn't actually proceed further. And he started the war in Donbass, but it continues until now, and Putin is not able to proceed. So, in order to take Ukraine quickly, then there was a plan of 2022 to take Ukraine as blitzkrieg, right? Moving troops to Belarus first, and then advancing from Belarus to Kiev. And when it started on 24th of September 22, the Russian government promised that it might be an operation which will take from three days to 3 weeks. But then Kiev would be taken, and this would be the end of the story. And indeed, Yanukovych, former Ukrainian president, was moved to Minsk those days because he was expected to be in Kiev very, very soon. And now, this didn't work. In 25, the idea was that since Putin was not able to take Ukraine using the army, he would use Trump to force Ukraine to capitulate. And this plan failed. I mean, we know now that it failed. Ukraine didn't capitulate. Europe refused to surrender and not to support Ukraine. Trump is pretending now that something is still, negotiations are still continue, but they do not. So, in this sense, Putin lost. Now the question is whether Europe would be able to rebuild itself quick enough to compensate Ukrainians with the loss of American weapons, and whether Europe would be quick enough in building its own defense system, because there is no NATO anymore and there is no United States anymore. So this is the issue. But I think as long as Ukrainians are holding Putin is stuck in Ukraine and he would not be able to proceed into Europe. So Europe has more time to prepare itself. And we see that Europe actually at this point understands the danger. I mean, we see Europeans talking a different language in relation to Russian aggression. We see that France is taking a completely different stand now, that it's forming a military budget of whatever, 7,800, I mean, sorry, 700, $800 billion. We see that Germany is changing laws in order to have 500 billion euros to build infrastructure, which is actually to build defense organism in Germany to become equipped with contemporary military, contemporary army. So we see that everybody understands the danger and no one is going to surrender. And when you talk to Europeans, they are expecting Russian to invade if they have opportunity to invade. But in order not to allow Russia to invade, the easiest way and the cheapest way actually is to help Ukrainians. And I think that's what's going to happen. So I do not see any possibility of peace in Ukraine. But this doesn't really mean that Putin is winning this war. He is not. The speed with which he's proceeding in Ukraine now is very, very slow. I mean, it's true he's killing people. It's true he's trying to advance and maybe advancing, but again, the speed is very, very slow. I do think, however, that in order to stop this war, you have to ask yourself a question: what should be done to force Putin to stop this war? And I think that from military point of view, the approach should be different. For the last 3 and more years, actually now, the way Europe and the United States, if we talk about Biden administration, the way they assisted Ukraine was to assist them so they would hold, but they would never win. And I think this has to be changed. I think this was a major mistake from day number one. I think it's clear after more than 3 years that this does not lead to the end of war, that Putin is not going to stop until he is stopped. So the question is again how to stop Putin, and I think the only answer is that you should give Ukrainians contemporary weapons, including long-range missiles, and you should allow them to strike the Russian territory if they feel that that's what they need to do. And they should be allowed, and this is important, they should be allowed to strike Moscow, because in Russia, the only center which exists is Moscow. Russia is a huge country, but this is a country of one city, and the city is Moscow. And unless you strike Moscow, nothing is going to happen and nothing will be changed.
To be honest, the situation on the front is very, very difficult, and Europe is moving very, very slowly. Does Ukraine have some leverage in this situation for today?
Well, it's of course difficult for me. I live in the United States to understand how dramatic situation of the front is. It might be no one has choice, unfortunately, because to fight or be overrun by Russia. And And if this happens, this is going to be a major catastrophe. And because we have two examples when Russia would finally take control of territories. One is the Czech Republic, the other one is Belarus. And in both cases, they would put in charge of those republics, puppets, which are just cruel dictators. And that's probably what Putin is planning or dreaming to do in Ukraine. And this is the main reason behind the demand for Zelensky to step down and to have new elections, because what Putin, of course, would try to do the same or after this, or planning to do after this, or dreaming to do after this, is to install, a person from Moscow, right, being new president, somebody like Viktor Medvedchuk or maybe something else, right? But it's somebody like another Kadyrov or another Lukashenko, who then would help him to use Ukraine in their operations against Europe. So this is not going to. If this happens, this is going to be absolutely, catastrophic event, not only for Ukrainians, but also for Europeans, because so far, Ukrainian army is the only army which exists in Europe. I mean, Europe is capable, of course, to form an army, and there are a lot of nations who are very skeptical, let's put it this way, about Russia and suspicious about Russian plans. So you do not need to explain to Poles, for example, or to Lithuanians how dangerous Russia is. And they have enough motivation to fight against Russia, but they have no experience and no training, real wartime training, while Ukrainian army is the real army with experience. So you cannot allow Putin to demobilize this army. You cannot allow Putin to take control of this army. If you do this, you endanger Europe, and I think this might be suicidal for Europe. So I sincerely hope that this is not going to happen, because no one has choice. Literally, no one has choice. Ukrainians do not have choice. They have to fight. Europeans do not have choice. They have, first of all, to help Ukrainians. If Putin opens the second front, if he moves troops in Belarus again, what he announced he will do in September of 25 of this year, like for military exercise, as he's saying. But that's, by the way, precisely what they were doing in 21 when they moved troops to Belarus, claiming that these are military exercises, and then, of course, invaded Ukraine. So if we see concentration of troops in Belarus again, then we know that he either plans to strike against Kiev, trying to, the second time to take Kiev again, or then he's planning to invade Eastern Europe. So that's what we need to look for, and that's what we try to avoid. But in order to avoid this, Europe has to really to try to help Ukrainians in contemporary weapons and with changing strategy. That's when Putin may have some reasons to stop the war, because at this point he's conducting this war like a permanent war when he is actually would be able to fight as long as he wants. Again, if we consider that this war started in 2014, then he is fighting in Ukraine for 11 years, not for 3 years, but for 11 years. And then if this war continues until the end of the year, well, technically speaking, until first week or whatever, second week of January, then this war will continue for Russia as long as the Great Patriotic War was continuing from 1941 to 1945 against Germany. So for Russia, this is a very long war, and they're losing in this war more than they lost in any other wars, except, of course, the Second World War. But the problem is that Russia doesn't care. Putin doesn't care how many people are killed. Russia doesn't care how many people are killed. And Russian people do not care how many of them are killed. So that's why if this war allowed to continue like this, it will never be stopped. It just will continue. So in order to continue to end this war, you should consider the option of striking Moscow, and then I think this war might be over in 2 weeks, literally. This is a peace plan. I mean, I would be happy if this would be a United States peace plan for Ukraine to give them long-range weapons and to allow strikes against Moscow. Then we would see the end of the war. Otherwise, we will not see it.
So actually, I hope Europe will understand all the threats, but it always takes sometimes, actually. So, Dr. Felshtinsky, thank you for this conversation.
Thank you very much for the invitation and your time.
And if this video was useful for you, our dear viewers, like and share. It's very important. And see you.